The myth of the Basajaun. The genetic background of modern-day Europe can often be a complicated topic to talk about. History often brings the migrations of faraway peoples, which is how the Indo-Europeans merged with the proto-populations of Old Europe. As a result, today many of us speak a derivation of the ancient Proto-Indo-European language. But what if we tell you that there are still some people left in Europe who preserve those seemingly lost links with ancient times and Europe as it was originally? One of these peoples is the Basques, a European ethnic group that numbers around 3 million people that inhabit their traditional homeland called the Basque Country. The region is located at the western end of the Pyrenees and covers parts of northern Spain and southern France. Largely considered to be remnants of the pre-Indo-European populations of Europe, the Basques are unique in so many aspects. And today we are getting to know one of their popular myths, with one question in mind: is it really a myth? The Basque people and their connection to pre-Indo-European peoples. Before we delve deeper into the nature of this colorful myth, we need to get acquainted with the Basque people. In their own language, they call themselves Euskaldanak, and in their homeland, they call it Escalheria. Crucial to our story are the Basque language and the origins of the Basque people. Unlike other European languages, Basque is completely unrelated to Indo-European languages. Basque is a language that is isolated and unrelated to any other known living language. It is widely regarded that, as such, Basque is one of the very few pre-Indo-European languages that have survived to the present day. Let us remind you that almost all European languages today descend from a single, Proto-Indo-European ancestor language. Several unique theories have been presented that attempt to prove that Basque is indeed a remnant of Old Europe. Old Europe is a term used to denote Europe before the widespread migrations of Indo-European peoples. One such proof is found in several Basque words: esto, knife, escora, axe, azur, hoe, and aster, tongs. Such words derive from the word eitz, meaning stone, which points to the existence of the language in a period when stone tools were in use. But just how much the Basques genetically have in common with the pre-Indo-European peoples is debatable. There is no doubt that at some point a mixture occurred, as is the case with the entire population of Europe. There is still a lot of Proto-European DNA in the blood of all Europeans. On closer analysis of some of the oldest European myths and traditions, we should be able to find remnants of oral tradition passed down through the generations to survive in the form of myth. These kinds of oral traditions could tell us more about an era, many thousands of years ago, when the people of Europe were starkly different in their customs. Could the Basque myth of Basajaun hold the key to understanding the peoples of Old Europe? Benevolent Lord of the Woods, is the myth of the Basajaun based on fact or fiction? In Basque mythology, there exists a creature known as the Basajaun. Translated, it means Lord of the Woods. Basajaun is described as a robust, large, and hairy hominid who lives in the forests. He also has a female counterpart and companion known as a Basandir. Now, here is where the Basque myth becomes very interesting. The Basajaun is believed to have built megaliths, protected flocks of livestock, and introduced agriculture and ironworking to humans. He is also said to have lived in caves, often deep in the woods, of which there are many in the Pyrenees. In general, the Basajaun is depicted as a benevolent creature, a sort of protector of the woods, and a protector of flocks and shepherds. Other rural legends still give him more attributes of a folk guardian. It is said that a Basajaun yells and hollers from the mountains whenever a storm is coming and warns the peasants and the shepherds to take shelter. But there are far more enigmatic aspects to this myth that quickly tickle our imagination and make us wonder whether or not this myth has its roots in fact or fiction. The old stories of the Basque country describe Basajaun as a teacher. The tales explain that Basajaun knew how to craft tools and taught people how to create weapons, mills, axles, saws, and how to smelt metals. He also instructed them in the skills needed for crop cultivation, forging, and milling. To top it all off, the Basajaun was responsible for building megaliths. Depicted as a robust man with a lot of hair on his body, he is depicted as an ancient man in his earliest steps towards civilization. In other words, the description of the Basajaun bears a striking resemblance to the Neanderthals, or even the European early modern humans, EMH, also known as Cro-Magnons. If we dig a little deeper, it's interesting to keep in mind that the Neanderthals persevered in the modern Basque country for quite a while after disappearing from other parts of Europe. The so-called Iberian Neanderthals persisted in the area of the Ebro River and the Pyrenees up until about 35,000 years ago, and perhaps even later. This area coincides almost exactly with the modern Basque country. It is widely thought that Neanderthal technology was quite sophisticated and boasted a complex stone tool industry, weaving, fire use, primitive art, primitive seafaring, primitive music, and so on. The extensive archaeological discoveries in relation to Neanderthals break the usual stereotype of these early hominids as cavemen with big clubs. But could the myth of the Basajaun provide even more insights? Enduring stories from an ancient people. Neanderthals are not known to have erected megaliths, even though they did boast exceptional strength, and are certainly not known for smelting, which came much, much later. Can it be that the Basque people, being old as they are, preserved tales of the earliest contacts between the Neanderthals of the Pyrenees and the European early modern humans, Western hunter-gatherers, who migrated into the area? It is known that around 16,000 BC, the climate got even warmer and allowed the people of the Magdalenian culture to expand into all corners of Europe. An interesting theory was put forward in 2008 by the Finnish linguist Kalevi Wilk. Wilk proposed that the Basque language is actually a remnant of a wider language family that was spoken all across Old Europe before gradually retreading westwards with the approach of the Indo-Europeans and their languages. Even the renowned and eminent scholar, the late Maria Gimbutas, stated firmly that the Basque language is a pre-Indo-European relic of the ancient Western European languages. It is the only indigenous language to survive the Indo-European invasions and cultural influences of the last 3,000 years. In her renowned work entitled The Living Goddess, she reflected thoroughly on the Basque people and, among other things, stated confidently that there is no doubt that the Basques are old Europeans whose traditions descend directly from Neolithic times. In 2012, the renowned Genographic Project of the National Geographic Society released an important study that showed a detailed DNA analysis of Basque peoples. It confirmed the unique genetic patterns that distinguished them from surrounding populations, supporting the theory that there is a partial or complete genetic continuity between modern Basque people and the Paleolithic and Mesolithic natives of the region. The idea that the myth of the Basajaun was born from actual contact with some of the last remaining Neanderthals of the ancient world can certainly seem far-fetched. Indeed, some aspects of the Basajaun myth simply don't correspond to what we know about the Neanderthals. For example, as far as we know, they weren't the ones to introduce complex technologies to Cro-Magnons. But even so, I and many others firmly believe that the Basajaun myth is in fact a surviving memory of the oldest history of Europe, which naturally had to survive in one of the oldest ethnicities of Europe, the Basques. Contact with Neolithic settlers, the birth of the Basajaun myth. It can be hypothesized that the Basajaun myth speaks of the time when the Basque peoples, isolated Proto-Europeans of the Paleolithic and Mesolithic who still relied on primitive industries and stone tools, came into contact with the more advanced settlers of the emerging Neolithic cultures. The emerging cultures were megalith builders, who brought with them a string of advanced technologies like agriculture, domestication of animals, refined stone tools, and the eventual emergence of metallurgy in the late Neolithic and early Chalcolithic. Once the dots are connected, the mythical figures of the Basajaun and Basendir take on the form of migrating Neolithic settlers, hairy and clad in furs and skins. They are accompanied by flocks of domesticated animals. They settle in the woods and gradually come into contact with the more primitive Basque peoples, bringing with them new beliefs, the building of megaliths, new tools, and new technologies. The wary, primitive, and Mesolithic populations would have seen these new arrivals as creatures from beyond or mythical protective lords of the woods. Even long after, when the two groups merged into something new, the isolated Basques preserved their language and identity, and the Neolithic settlers simply remained mythical, giving rise to the Basajaun myth. The simple birth of a lasting myth. A unique theory related to the contact of Indo-Europeans and Old Europeans can show us just how easy it is for a myth or a legend to be born out of a simple encounter between two totally different groups of people. That theory is related to Pan, the ancient Greek god of the wilds, protector of shepherds, flocks, and nature. He is portrayed as a bearded and hairy man, carrying a shepherd's staff, and with the legs of a goat. The cult of Pan emerged in Arcadia, the district of the mountain people, culturally separated from other Greeks. The fun part comes when we study the oldest portrayals of rural mountain shepherds of the Balkans, bearded and hairy, carrying staffs. They had a unique tradition of wearing pants made from shaggy goat coats, the so-called fleece trousers. For a new settler coming into contact with proto-populations of the mountainous Balkans, it can be easy to observe from a distance a unique, shaggy person who seemingly has the legs of a goat, unlike anything ever before seen. And before you know it, a myth is born: mysterious goat-legged shepherds of the high mountains, protecting the flocks. There are a lot of mysteries still lurking in the history of Europe and the cultures of the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, and Chalcolithic. A lot of secrets still hide in the deepest reaches of time, and much is simply unknown. There remain intriguing remnants that beg to be the subject of extensive research: complex megalithic structures, remnants of matriarchal cults and ancestor worship, and unique funerary practices. But thanks to geographical isolation, the Basque people and their Old European language have allowed a crucial glimpse into the ancient history of Europe, which tells us one very important thing: a theory does not have to be as clear as daylight in order to bear credibility. Even when something sounds so stupidly simple and far-fetched, sometimes facts can only make it even closer to the truth. At times, we underestimate the combined simplicity and complexity of humans through time, as well as their ability to create colorful myths from things that are slightly hard to comprehend. And once a myth like that settles within the memory of a generation or two, it can survive for centuries to come. Could it be that the myth of Basajaun is a fantastic example of this trend? The Basajaun myth is fairly simple in its description, and not much about it is known besides the aspect. But even those few snippets of an old Basque story can open the doors to a whirlwind of information that tickles the fancy of all lovers of ancient history. It is an excellent opportunity to revisit the migrations of early Cro-Magnons and Western hunter-gatherers, WHG, and to reflect on the migrations of technologically advanced cultures within early Neolithic Europe that slowly created the world as we know it today.